It's the end of 2019, and it's time for me to reflect on my top 50 coasters. This year was a bit of a down year for me, especially compared to 2018 when I added 170 credits, and I rode some of the best coasters in the country. I focused more on the obscure Western coasters this year, and most of them weren't very good. I added 41 credits to bring my count up to 424. I also got to re-ride a lot of my favorite rides, and I moved a lot of things around. So here it is, my 2019 top 50 coasters. We're gonna kick this off with one of my new credits for 2019, Coaster at Playland. This coaster isn't as elite as some people make it out to be, though it could just be my preference for more sustained airtime. But this ride is still insane, and it makes you fear for your life, so I had to find a place for it in my top 50. I hope you like Woodies, because here are 3 more to start this list. Let's go to Six Flags Great America for Viper, still hanging on to a top 50 spot. I didn't get to ride it this year, and the last time I rode it was actually back in 2017, but in 2020 I'm definitely planning on getting back there. Next up is the Golden Ticket Award stealing Phoenix at Knoebels. This is actually in my top 10 Woodies, barely, so it's pretty crazy to think that Amusement Today voters think that this is the best wooden coaster in the world. But it's still a fun, airtime-filled ride, and it earns a top 50 spot. I'm hoping that in 2020 I can get some warm, dry rides on this in order to contrast the rain rides I got in 2018. One more Woody, for now, and this is the often overlooked American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis. It's a smooth ride full of airtime, and it's by far the best ride in the park. It's really the only reason I'm looking forward to getting back to the park at the end of my 2020 road trip. Alright, it's time for some steel. This is Steel Eel at SeaWorld San Antonio, a funky Morgan mini hyper that actually outclasses the larger original Morgans that I've ridden. This actually has some great airtime at the beginning, but it could use a little help at the end, which is why it's not as high as it could be. I may get back here for re-rides next year if I make it out to San Antonio for the brand new Texas Stingray. Speaking of mini hypers, let's go to Kentucky Kingdom for Lightning Run. This is another ride that I was hoping would be a lot better than it turned out to be, but it was still a fun ride with strong airtime, and I'm hoping to give it another chance next year before heading over to Hollywood Nights. From mini hypers to questionable hypers, we have Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, the biggest loser of my 2019 list. I had this ranked inside my top 10 for 10 years until I finally made it back out to Busch Gardens in April, and I was severely disappointed with how weak Apollo was running, dropping it all the way down to number 44, my lowest ranking for a B&M Hyper. The first coaster with an inversion on this list checks in at number 43, Medusa at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. I got some more rides on this on Labor Day weekend, and it's as good as ever. Kudos to the park for keeping this ride smooth, and props to B&M for this great floorless layout. Still one-upping Medusa in the floorless category is Kraken at SeaWorld Orlando. It's very similar to Medusa, but that second half of the ride is so good and unique that it earns the title as my favorite floorless. Keeping with the B&M theme, here comes another hyper, Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland. Between the basic layout and the ride-op's tendency to staple, this is lower on my list, and it's less impressive than the other B&M hypers, even though most enthusiasts seem to rank this much higher than I do. I've ridden 14 RMCs, and they're all on this list, and we see the first one appear here at number 40, Railblazer at California's Great America. A great, fast, accelerating ride that's just over too quickly and will leave marks on your shoulders. And if you see Railblazer on here, you know what's coming next. Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I got to ride this once in 2019, and I still like this a little bit more than Railblazer. I like the setting a bit more, and for whatever reason, I just get better rides on the Six Flags version of this clone. An outstanding GCI comes in at number 38, Gold Striker at California's Great America. This thing is out of control. I just hope that maybe the park can retract some of the rough spots on this 6-year-old coaster, and I'll definitely be back out there next year to give it another spin. One of my winners of 2019 is my number 37, Intimidator at Carowinds. I bumped this up a little after my 2019 rides, which I found to be much more enjoyable than my 2018 rides. And even though this is a lower tier B&M hyper, I would still love to have this at my home park. RMC is back on this list with Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City, the least impressive non-Raptor RMC for me, but even a non-impressive RMC easily makes this list. I'm just hoping that the parks with topper track wooden coasters can smooth out some of the rough spots that seem to be popping up. The first of 3 B&M inverts is my number 35 coaster. This is one of the originals, Raptor at Cedar Point. I love how huge this thing is. It's got forceful elements and a great setting on the midway, and when that mid-course brake run is turned off, you're in for a wild second half. Barely edging out Raptor is the other Ohio invert, Banshee at Kings Island. It's 20 years younger than Raptor and just a little bit better. Bigger, faster, smoother, and arguably more intense. This gets overlooked a bit at Kings Island, but it's a world-class invert. Heading back over to Cedar Point, we have Valraven. And even though I didn't ride this in 2019, it dropped a few spots because I did get to ride Griffin, and I realized that even though I love Valraven, the vest restraints do kill a lot of the ride's potential. I still like this ride more than Griffin, but that may change once I get another ride next year, as well as ride Yukon Striker for the first time. One more Ohio coaster for now. Also at Cedar Point, we have Maverick. Last year I had this below Valraven, and I guess I made it right this year. There are plenty of things I dislike about this coaster, but I can't deny how cool that layout is and how unique the coaster is as a whole, and it deserves to be ranked higher than Valraven. Leaving Ohio, but not going too far, at number 31 we have Bantam's Revenge at Kennywood. This was my 300th coaster and I loved it. I knew it was a solid top 50 coaster when I rode it, and it just misses my top 30. Speed, smoothness, and wild airtime make this ride worth going to Kennywood for. Kicking off the top 30 is the original RMC, New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. Looking at all of the new RMCs and how twisty their layouts are, New Texas Giant almost seems outdated, and it is a little bit. I have dropped this a few spots from last year, as I rode this a few times in April and August, but I still loved every ride I've ever gotten on it. My highest ranked inverting B&M is Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. This ride mesmerized me when I rode it in October of 2018, and after 4 rides, I finally realized that not only was this ride great, it was truly elite and it deserves a spot in my top 30. Let's tee up a couple of RMCs, starting with Goliath at Six Flags Great America. It's been over 2 years since I've ridden this, and the ride is such a rush, but it is short, and it lacks the abundance of airtime that other RMCs have, so it's in the middle lower tier. Just ahead of Goliath is Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. A longer ride, but a little less intense. It has good airtime moments, but they are on the weak side for an RMC. But this ride really pulls off the good inversions better than most of the RMCs out there. I got some good rides on this in August, and it solidified its place as an average RMC. A couple B&Ms take the 26 and 25 spot. Let's go to Canada's Wonderland for Leviathan, the original B&M Giga and a great ride. Compared to Fury and some other of the big B&Ms, it doesn't quite stack up, but it's currently my favorite coaster in Canada. And then there's Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia, marking the halfway point in this countdown. This barely qualifies as hyper status, but it's unique and powerful, providing plenty of airtime, positive G's on the helix, and a unique layout that leaves the park. I got a few rides in April, and I moved it up a couple spots from last year's ranking. Goliath's neighbor comes in at number 24, Twisted Cyclone at Over Georgia. This is small but mighty. Another ride I got a couple rides on back in April, and despite its short ride duration, the elements are powerful, which is why it actually ranks higher than a lot of the RMCs on this list. One of the more maligned B&M hypers checks in at number 23, Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I had a decent ride on this in October. It definitely delivers some good airtime, but not any better than some of the hypers higher on this list. And it does have a unique second half, which I appreciate. I did drop this a bit on my list, and it does unfairly get overshadowed by El Toro in the same park, but it's still a great ride, and I'd love to have this at my home park. Next up is Cannibal at Lagoon, the 116-degree, 208-foot monster that Lagoon built in-house for 2015, and it delivers an incredible ride experience. I rode this back in August for the first time in 2 years, and it was just as good as I remember it, and it makes Lagoon a destination for enthusiasts. Nearly cracking my top 20 is a brand new coaster, TMNT Shellraiser at American Dream's Nickelodeon Universe. I knew this ride would be good, but I didn't think it would blow me away like it did. Crazy launch, crazy drop, crazy inversions. Definitely get to New Jersey next year to ride this. Number 20 is another unique coaster, Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. Such a cool ride with its vertical drop out of the station, spinning launches, and spinning inversions. This should be a bucket list coaster for everyone. I don't know if I'll be able to get there in 2020, but I'm hoping that I can. Now we're getting into the elite rides, and at number 19 we have Voyage at Holiday World. It may seem a little low to some people, but I'm just more impressed by the forces of the rides above it, even though this has incredible length and a great setting, and I can't wait for the trimless night rides at Hollywood Nights next year. The original Hyper still holds up as a great ride, and it comes in at number 18, Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point. Even though this ride has some funky aero transitions, they actually work to your advantage because they have those pointy airtime hills at the end, and they provide some of the most insane airtime you'll find anywhere. Heading down Ohio, we have Mystic Timbers, a GCI wooden coaster at Kings Island that shattered my expectations the first time I rode it in 2018. It's glossy smooth, it has great crossovers, and it has great airtime, which is unusual for GCI. Going back up to Cedar Point, my number 16 coaster is Millennium Force. And I've been riding this for more than half my life now, and even though I've dropped it from my number 2 coaster all the way to number 16, I still love every ride I've gotten on it. Morning, day, and night, despite some of its flaws, it's still one of my all-time favorite coasters. Alright, get ready for back-to-back-to-back RMCs, starting with the first one to feature an inversion, Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. This was super close to Millennium Force for me, but the great airtime moments this offers pushed it over the top, especially that crazy dive off the quarry wall. Next up is Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. I rode this 6 times in a row on a rainy morning, and that's my entire experience with it. I have no plans on getting back to King's Dominion anytime soon, but this is an excellent airtime-filled RMC, and it's the best ride in the park. Sorry, I305. Rounding out this trio of RMCs is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom. This looked to me like a weaker RMC, but I was definitely wrong about that. This has some of the strongest airtime I've felt on any coaster. Just like Twisted Timbers, I rode this 6 times in a row, and that's my whole experience with it. But hopefully before Hollywood Nights, I can get back to Kentucky Kingdom so I can get some more rides on this awesome RMC. I only have 4 Intamins on this list, but coming in at number 12 is Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. This would be so much higher without those U-brick lap bars, but even with the bad restraints, I thought the layout was masterful and easily one of Intamin's best creations. Barely missing my top 10 is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is at my home park, so I ride this several times a year, and it never gets old. This is the highest ranked coaster on my list that doesn't focus on airtime. It's just absolute insanity. There's not much more to say about it. Kicking off my top 10 is Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America. I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I love the Twister layout. It's unique, and it still manages to deliver strong airtime moments, including the first drop and the drop off the mid-course. Another B&M hyper comes in at number 9, Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This runs right along the lake, and it features some of the most sustained airtime moments I've experienced. This is one of the highest regarded B&M hypers, and it deserves the hype. Number 8 is an old favorite, Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. This was my number 1 for a long time, and then my number 2 for almost another decade, but I had to drop it after my 2017 rides. It just doesn't hold up to some of the more modern coasters that rank higher, but it still delivers a spectacular ride. I ride this several times a year, and it definitely deserves a top 10 spot. For number 7, let's go to my backyard for Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is an RMC where every element is great. It's got some strong airtime, crazy whip, hang time, and you get to ride on both tracks, and sometimes you even get to duel. It's a top tier RMC, and it's the ride that I've gotten the most cycles on. Number 6 is my highest ranked B&M hyper, Diamondback at Kings Island. This one is just different from the rest. There is so much great airtime on this thing. It's all so sustained, it's a long ride with a good wooded setting, and it finishes with the splashdown. My rides in 2018 were just as good as my rides in 2016, so I feel like I have a good feel for this ride. And now for the elite top 5, and barely hanging on is Lightning Rod at Dollywood. I finally got some more rides on this after riding it during its first week of operation in 2016, and my 2019 rides were a little disappointing. It's running a little slower and rougher than I remember, but it's still good enough to hang on to my top 5, but I can't see it ranking any higher. At number 4 is a kind of unpopular pick. It's Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. I know that on its 3rd lap it loses a lot of speed, but the layout is so great and the ride is so long with so many great inversions and strong airtime moments that it still deserves to be in my top 4. I don't plan on riding this anytime soon, so I'll have to rely on my 2015 and 2018 rides for now. Coming in at number 3 is Fury 325 at Carowinds, and I got 10 rides on this in 2018 and another 8 rides in 2019. I always seem to go to Carowinds on rainy, empty days. I got my first front row rides this year, as well as those epic back row rides, and this ride is elite in every way. It's got a solid spot in my top 3. Barely missing my number 1 spot is El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I love this ride, possibly more than any other coaster, even if it's not my number 1 anymore. I just got 8 more rides in October, and they were spectacular. The only knock on this coaster is it has some rough spots, but it's really nothing to complain about. I hope Six Flags keeps El Toro running strong for the long haul. And finally, my number 1 is still Steel Vengeance. It's too bad that I haven't been back to Cedar Point in a year and a half to get back on the world's best coaster, but I'll be making at least 1 trip there in 2020, so I'll definitely make up for it next year. Steel Vengeance is just the perfect coaster to me. Tall, fast, steep, full of inversions and airtime, as well as over a mile of track. El Toro is number 2, but it's a distant number 2 to Steel Vengeance, which is in a league of its own. So that's it, my final rankings for 2019. This year was kind of a down year because of the types of parks I was focusing on knocking out, but I'm hoping to add a ton of new great coasters in 2020. Let me know what you think of this list in the comments below, and I'll see you guys all next time.